Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Friday, and that means, among other things, ShakeTube 2017, which is a very informal, very inviting event that was created by Curtis Books and Film and Lukash over at his channel, in which we read uh, one Shakespeare play a week until early December, and make a video about them at the end of the week. Make a video about each one. Uh, and the play we're doing this time around is Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Roman drama that has perplexed some critics, and that has a speech in it that school children have had to memorize for hundreds of years. And the the play's focal point, the center of the play, is the assassination of Julius Caesar by a group of people, a group of Roman senators, in the Senate House, and that has confused critics too, because you think, well, if Shakespeare is at the heart of a tragedy, surely he should die at the climax, and should also have some sort of tragic element about him. Instead, the confusing thing, at least on the surface, is that Caesar dies right away. Comparatively speaking, he dies in the middle of the play, and he isn't a tragic hero. He doesn't have any qualms with himself, nor does he have any qualms with fate. The burden of that kind of thinking about the tragedy of the play seems to happen elsewhere, and has led to all sorts of talk about what category it really falls under. I think the key to understanding that is also a lucky stroke that we have when it comes to Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar is one of the few, I think, one of the few plays we have in the Shakespeare canon that we can more or less accurately pinpoint to a date. Shakespearean scholars make too complacent an idea about how easy it is, about how sure we are of the dates of Shakespeare's plays. I think there's usually a lot more doubt than the standard biographies, for instance, say. But with Julius Caesar, thanks to a couple of obscure events that we don't have to get into in this video, but thanks to a few little events, we can be pretty sure that the play was written around 1599. And the reason why that's crucial, the reason why I think that helps to explain the play just in general, is to think about what was going on in England in 1599. Queen Elizabeth had been on the throne for a long time, and was, by the standards of her time, old. But far more importantly than that, Queen Elizabeth had been on the throne for a long time, was now obviously, even to her most sycophantic court poets, past the age of childbearing, and had no heir. And it's a little hard. I think sometimes it's a little hard for people in the modern era to get a sense of what that was like, of the nuclear winter, the impending nuclear winter that felt like, how it oppressed people. Queen Elizabeth was very old in 1599, but in 1599 there were still people around old enough to remember firsthand what happens in a kingdom that isn't a constitutional monarchy, but is an actual police state monarchy. What happens in such a kingdom when the succession is questioned or fought over? It's the worst thing in the world. It's in a previous generation, one commentator referred to it as a time when Christ and his saints slept, and that's what it felt like when you have, as Cardinal Wolsey says in The Man for All Seasons, bloodthirsty barons ramping the country from end to end. It's the number one thing to avoid. We don't feel it today in America, of course, and you don't feel it even in the UK today, because there's nothing riding on the succession to the monarchy. But even in living memory, something like that emotional upheaval, a very personal emotional upheaval, was felt. The people living in the UK today have grandparents who remember the abdication crisis. They remember what it was like for the King of England to abdicate, even though he was young and in fine health. The upheaval that was real. And now you manufacture that 100-fold, and you have an idea of what was going through the minds of the people who were going to see Julius Caesar when it was originally put on stage. They knew that their monarch was not going to live forever, and they knew that there was no heir, and that was a tremendous weight on their minds, because you have to think, They knew it, and so did every other power base in the country and outside the country, that this could be a fruit ripe for plucking. That's terrifying. In the time, that's terrifying. In 1599, that's terrifying. If you own a shop and you're thinking that. Which helps, I think, to clarify the play, because the play is about insurrection. And it's not about, despite the fact, a few feints here and there in the course of the play, it's not about overthrowing a tyrant. We hear at the beginning, in the very first scene, we hear some obviously disgruntled people talk about reports they've had that some people have been put to silence, have been killed by Caesar's secret police because they disrespected statues of him. We don't see that. And that might seem facile, but when Shakespeare wants to show you in injustice, he shows it to you. In the same play, when he wants to show you the fickle injustice of the Roman mob, he shows it to you, including in an indelible scene starring a man who has the wrong name and is killed just because of that. But also, we see inside, we have scenes later in the play, we see inside the cold, calculating injustice of some of the characters in the play. We don't ever see Julius Caesar being a tyrant in this play. And everyone around him, the main actors, the main walkers and talkers in the play, are doing just fine out of his reign. They're not being thwarted in any way. And their motivations are suspect. Casca being the most Cassius and Casca are motivated by envy. They're motivated because they aren't Caesar. When Cassius is going on his great tirade to Brutus about how horrible Caesar is, and asks, "On what meat does this our Caesar feed, that he hath grown so great?" When he asks that question, he's not asking because he wants to banish the meat. He's asking because he wants to feed on it himself. You can feel it. It might not be true of Brutus, but it's true of all the lean and hungry men around him. They want to be Caesar. They don't object to tyranny. They object to the roll of the dice that has someone else in the center seat, which you would think would throw the dramatic spotlight onto Brutus, but he's kind of a non-entity. he's a ditherer in the mold that would later become Hamlet, that Shakespeare would later take to the cleaners with Hamlet, which is a point that's been made by the authority figure that Lukács thought might be good to lug into this discussion. Harold Bloom, who's, he's deeply, he thinks that he's Falstaff, and he's erotically in love with Hamlet, and for him the rest of Shakespeare can go suck an egg, and so if there's the slightest hint that there's a precursor to Hamlet, then Harold Bloom's going to be right on the case. So he gives us a few choice Bloomian sentences about poor Brutus. Brutus is such a puzzle that is wonderfully interesting to Shakespeare as to us. To call Brutus a sketch for Hamlet destroys poor Brutus. He hasn't a trace of wit, insouciance, or charisma. Though everyone within the play clearly regards him as the Roman charismatic after Caesar. Mark Antony has considerably more zest, and Cassius rather more intensity. But who or what is Brutus? His own reply would be that Brutus is Rome Brutus, which tells us at once too much and too little. Yeah, thanks, Harold. That's great. Tells us too much and too little? Really? Thanks. Has anything ever in the history of the world, outside of bloated academia, taught us too much and too little at the same time? Anyway, the play is about what happens, the danger of insurrection. The danger of in the play is as close as Shakespeare comes to something that might have gotten him tortured. In the play, Caesar is old and infirm. That those infirmities are not in the translation of Plutarch that Shakespeare is using as the source of this play, using to such a degree that at times in the course of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, the North translation of Plutarch is there word for word. It's just turned into verse. Shakespeare adds that part, and you got to ask why. And I think that's the reason, because the play is about the danger of trimming self-centered men or their well-intentioned philosophical catspaws overthrowing someone who's held power for a long time and who the people love. Uh, it had to have been on the mind of every Londoner in 1599, which might explain why Shakespeare was so popular, why Julius Caesar was so popular. And I'm not sure why. I don't think that explains its popularity ever since. I think its popularity ever since is explained by the fact that, as I mentioned the last time, it's unbelievably gorgeous. It's beautifully written. Every scene, every character, just an amazing thing to speak out loud. When I was rereading it for ShakeTube 2017, I was rereading huge chunks of it out loud, just for the sheer joy of saying the words. And those are my main thoughts this time around on ShakeTube 2000. This is my favorite Shakespeare play. I could go on for an hour on Julius Caesar and its connection to everything that the Elizabethans thought about power and rule. There are books written on it every season. I gobble them up, intensely, and also the characters involved and what they're like, and every single production I have seen, every single movie production, and I've seen it in theaters so many times. I've lost count of how many times. But that's my main point, was to try and it's been my experience in teaching Julius Caesar that it's the play that confuses students the most. They love reading it, not least because it's short, but also because it's really fun to read. But they don't know what to make of it, and I think that's what to make of it. It's a play about insurrection. It's a play about the danger of getting rid of someone when there's no one who's both worthy and capable to take that someone's place, which was kind of on Elizabeth's mind. That's kind of why she put off having an heir. But anyway, that's all my thoughts for now. Next time we move on to A Midsummer Night's Dream, a total change of register, high comedy after dark political drama, and I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.